Radio Sports Talk and other topics relatable to sports fans. My name is Alfonso Cal. Difficulties. Let's try to work that out. Um, about the Madness is kicking off today. Um, Mr. Berger, are you there now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. All right. So we've already introduced you. So if you want to say hi to everybody.
Awesome. What's up, everybody?
All right. Cool. So March Madness. Do you have any quick thoughts on those? We'll have more information on that next week, but we just want to mention that it kicks off today.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, we'll welcome back the NCAA tournament. The first last year's was canceled around this time was when everything kind of shut down quickly. So the tournament comes back this year with a lot of new faces. They're all 67 teams, 68 teams are in Indianapolis in a bubble for the rest of the tournament. So good for the NCAA to be able to figure that out. First time since 1975, Duke and Kentucky both missed the tournament, and it remains to be seen tonight. Michigan State has to win a play-in game, otherwise they'll miss the tournament for the first time since the 70s as well. So a lot of fun stuff to look at, new faces, new opportunities for some of these schools to make names for themselves as opposed to the same couple teams.
Yeah, I was looking at the overview, and we have Alabama and Ohio State in the top 10. So that's kind of what we're kind of familiar with that with the NCAA football tournaments.
Yeah, and with the way the tournament brackets are seeded, so Alabama's a number 2 and Ohio State number 2 seed in their respective regions. However, in the final NCAA rankings, I don't believe Alabama was actually ranked, but they did win the SEC championship, and Ohio State as well. Actually, Ohio State, I believe, ended up losing the Big Ten title game to Illinois. So couple different ways that things go. SEC typically hasn't been a powerhouse outside of Kentucky, and in recent memory, the University of Florida, they're not really a big power when it comes to basketball, but a big school's still there. But these are fun for Cinderella. You get the Loyola Chicagos in the world, you got the Winthrops, the Colgates. That's where it's fun to see some teams make some noise.
Yeah, it was funny. A quick story for myself. I remember I always hated March. Like March was always like the worst sports month of the year for me because you'd go through with football and football's out, baseball's working its way in there but not fully on yet, and then you have for me personally the Rangers and the Knicks wouldn't be doing all that great in season, so. And then just like everything's just March basketball and everything's just basketball all over like the college basketball. It's like, oh man, can we just get through this already? So go back to regular ESPN.
It's interesting because New York's a big. I mean, this not necessarily this year, but in past years, the Big East tournament's always a big deal. Syracuse University, St. John's, Seton Hall. So you have a lot of big schools around these parts. So. That's interesting to hear that it's not that big of an impact on you.
Yeah, well, I just never really got into the full college basketball theme. I think a lot of times, a lot of people who follow college sports, like unless they went to the actual school, and just gravitate toward a school, no matter I guess like just there's not really anything really concrete about it. But for me, I never really associated with a college team to them and call them like this is my favorite team or like this is my 2 or 3 favorite teams. I mean, I don't really, never really got into it. So it's kind of like college sports has always been a little for me to try to get into. You follow it for the history and the things like that, but never really got onto it. Like like I love Michigan, so I like a bunch of Michigan gear and get like an old Chris Webber. Fantastic Five.
Right.
But I will say that Gonzaga being number 1 reminds me of Adam Morrison over there.
Yeah, I got a feeling that Gonzaga's going to be making a quick exit.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I like the fact that Ohio State actually
Yeah.
tournament. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. So this week. So this week the NFL free agency opened up, and we had some big names going into some new places. Harris, what do you got for us on there?
Do you want me to go through the list, or you want to rattle off some names and react to them? Because about 25 new players have found new homes in the last 4 days.
I'd say let's just do like some highlights and some teams that stuck out more than others.
Well, the Patriots spent almost double the amount of money of everybody. So I guess we could start with my New England Patriots. Boy, are they all the way back. Love the signings that we made a big splash rather quickly, adding Jonnu Smith, tight end out of Tennessee. We added Kendrick Bourne from San Francisco. We added Nelson Aguilar from the Raiders. I mean, who didn't we add? Dante Hightower comes back from opting out. They re-signed Kyle Van Noy after being in Miami for a year. That was this morning, the big news this morning. So, I mean, the Patriots reset, reloaded. Bill must have looked at that roster and how they did last year and said, nope, not doing that again. No chance I'm going 7-8 again or 7-9 again. Now I'm going to try to go for it. And they sure did. They got Hunter Henry, arguably the two best tight end free agents on the market they picked up. One of the bigger name wide receivers they picked up. They re-signed Cam Newton. And I don't think they're done. They signed, I think there's still another quarterback in the future. They paid Cam a small amount of money to come back, but the door is still open for them to make a young quarterback move, another wide receiver move maybe. They're in the market for a running back. So we'll see kind of what happens there. They've made the biggest, I think, improvement of everybody that so far that's made free agency moves.
Yeah, a lot of people say a lot of people have speculated how they've been able, how do the Patriots have all this money? They had what 6, 7 starters last year opt out, which ended up saving the money, and then the NFL has the interesting wrinkle where they have the rollover cap. So like whatever cap you don't use, like you have to hit a certain amount. Like you can't really go below. There is like a limit where you can't go below a certain number. I forget what that number is, but at that point, if you as long as you're over that number, whatever number you don't hit at the top ends up rolling over until next year. It's kind of like the way AT&T used to do the phone minutes back in the day.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, that's basically how they've been able to have all this money. I know that the New York Jets ended up getting some more cap relief because of that too, because they didn't spend all of their allotment last year, so it rolled over into this year. I'd have to say that the Patriots are definitely that this had to be in the plans of how the Patriots operated, because Bill Belichick, we all know he's a visionary, so we know that he had this kind of, he was probably thinking about this, like when everything was breaking down last year, that this was going to happen. So it's basically just the plans executing that the New England Patriots always end up doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the initial thoughts when they've seen some of the NFL has an interesting rule with this league, quote unquote, legal tampering period that they have, where the teams directly can't say that they make deals. They can't say they're talking to people. It can only be reported by agents and media. So this is really yesterday was the first day of the official league year where the trades and all of the signings can be made public by the teams. And over the course of the legal tampering period, you kind of get fed the nonsense and the fluff that agents bring to sports. And you hear these big numbers being thrown around. Nelson Aguilar got 42,000. Hunter Henry got 34.5. Jonnu Smith got a lot of money. Kyle Van Noy technically signs for like a 7-year deal that they thought was 1 year. When in hindsight, the way that the NFL it's actually reported, The biggest cap hit for the Patriots next season is going to be Matt Judon at $6.4 million. So it's almost next to nothing when you look at the way that these are restructured. So again, Bill Belichick's playing chess while every other GM's playing checkers, signing these guys to long-term deals for big money that they deserve, but teams were weary to give them because of the low cap. All the contracts are backloaded with this voidable years clause that the CBA has, and they're basically all set up for like about a 2 or 3 year window here.
Yeah, we all know that. We talked about it in our show 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have a show last week, but we talked about it at length where the 7-year contracts, they never get to the 7th year anyway. So it's not, it's all about the guaranteed money and, the structure of what looks like a good deal, but they never get to the end when they're like between 5 and 7 year deals. What I would say is this is not surprising what the Patriots have done. I wouldn't be surprised. Now there was an interesting. Well, we were talking before the show, and you had mentioned that some people that all right. So New England was not an attractive place to go, or that was like some speculation around the league. I'm gonna say myself that I've never heard anything like that, and I think that obviously the Patriots have been able to just have the next man up and not really care like about the names or spending big money because they didn't want to tie up the cap and make sure that the whole team was strong rather than just one position and having one all-star player when they'd have, basically they groom all-star players or just the coaching system was so good that they were able to maximize a little bit of talent. So what's your take on that? The New England Patriots not being a attractive place to go?
Well, let me break down that monologue you just had there for a little bit because there's a lot to unpack there. Let me start with the names and the faces didn't matter. That was the case that made New England the destination because it made it a free agent destination for 2 reasons. One was Bill Belichick. 2 was Tom Brady. Outside of those 2 names, it didn't matter. All right. It was always the next man up, do your job mentality for Belichick. That was the quote unquote Patriot way, right? But then the rumors started flying around when Tom left New England last year. Is this the actual place that people thought it was? And the rumors started flying. Danny Amendola said that Tom Brady's the Patriot way, it was his work ethic, his persona, his presence on the team that made the culture what it was, not Bill. Bill makes football very unenjoyable by basically making it exactly what you said, a nameless, faceless operation. You are the team. That is your job. And then you started to hear the comments from Bruce Arians saying, I let Tom be Tom. Tom never had a chance to be himself. You start to hear, those were the rumors that were flying around, and that New England is not an enjoyable place, that people were going to New England to play because they wanted to play with Tom. And now you're starting to see that also with Tampa, right? Guys are starting to head down that way, and Ndamukong Suh went down there. A.Q. Shipley, when he was a free agent, went down there. So Leonard Fournette went down there. So you see what happens, right? Now you started to see that's not the case, right? Hunter Henry decides to go. All of these big names. Kyle Van Noy left the Patriots a year ago in free agency, signs with the Dolphins for $10 million a year, gets replaced for the Dolphins, a rival of the Patriots. People said, "Oh, he followed the defensive coordinator down to Miami." Comes back. Now he's back with the Patriots. It was never about. It was Belichick and Brady, and the conversation that they need to be separated from one another. It's not a who benefited from who and who benefited from the other. They benefited from one another equally, in my opinion. So I think obviously Tom was able to go down and win in Tampa. Now Bill obviously didn't like that, and now he's going for it. And we could see next February a Patriots and Buccaneers Super Bowl.
The one thing we've talked at length about, how Tom Brady has changed his culture from being like a non-system quarterback. The system quarterback came from the couple of games that he's ended up missing, like he ended up missing, what was it, part of the 2015 season with the torn ACL, and
Yep.
I'm not sure exactly what year it was, and then there were other years that he missed games here and there. He had a little bit of he had the 4-game suspension that he had to go through, and the Patriots just kept on winning. Like the year that was when the Matt Castle show ended up going 11-5 and missing the playoffs, and that there were the other years like the Patriots had they had a winning record when Tom Brady wasn't available or didn't play for the few games. It's not like there was a huge sample size there, but he was able to. The Patriots were still able to win, so that's where a lot of the system quarterback came from. Now, my perspective is, I just think the Patriots have always been a desired place to go, and they've had such a strong system within themselves, whether it be because of Brady, because of Belichick, whatever it was. I mean, the system just works, and let's all face it, we know that. So, in going through all of that, there were situations where they would be able to just take anybody and throw them into these positions and do well. Like, why would you spend $10-15 million on one specific person when you can get the same production from somebody who's just off of the tryouts, and just like you see the characteristics in them in the scouting and the player development where you're able to just get the same production than somebody who's making 10 or 15 million. And that's what the Patriots have always been able to do, and that's why they've been successful for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with you. I think right now, what the Patriots have done so far in free agency is very uncharacteristic of that program. And because of exactly what you said, they draft well, they develop well, and they trade well. One of the other things that's happened in the past. So this is very uncharacteristic. It's the most money that Bill has spent in free agency, I think, and they said 10 years. And you're 100% right. But I think the issue that we all have and see, and obviously it's the big sports trying to fill up time and create headlines for everybody. The reason why most people the question was Tom Brady. Did Tom Brady leave because he was unhappy? Is the Patriot way not fun football? Do people not want to go there? That question is, we don't know what the other culture was, right? Bill came in, and then very quickly Tom came in. And that's what we've known as Patriots fans, and for other people, haters, for the last 20 years.
Well, we do know we have the small sample of when Bill Belichick was in the Cleveland Browns, and they didn't draw anything in the short time that he was there as a head coach. So there is that little bit.
Yeah, and then the day and a half he spent as the Jets head coach, signed his resignation on a napkin and walked out the door.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's, we can say like which one was the better force, but it's kind of like it's a useless argument. Like they were both together and they created everything. They created what.
And another argument is
all
Bill's
see
a
as successful.
defensive-minded head coach. Bill never ran the offense that much. He obviously had involvement, but it wasn't him. He ran the defense. That's always been the way it was. So to put the two in the same boat and say, all right, who's holding us up? It's a tougher argument because I think they needed each other more than anything else. You saw the Patriots never got it done when Tom Brady wasn't the quarterback. They'd have spurts here and there. They went 11-5 and made the playoffs, but lost. Jimmy G lost. I mean, he won the games during that suspension, but that team ended up winning the Super Bowl. So that team was all good before. It didn't matter who the quarterback was. I mean, granted, would they have won the Super Bowl without Tom Brady? No. Would they might have gone 11-5 again? Probably. So, and that's good enough to win that division. Maybe not now with the Bills as good as they are, which they made a nice free agent, or not a nice one, a fun one at least, a funny one. We'll get into that here in a minute after we get through this. But I think the Patriot way it's just hard work. There's no simple way around it. Tom Brady works hard. Bill Belichick works hard. Both of them live in the building, right? They're leaders. It's leadership. It's accountability in that room and in that stadium. So I think, but this was fun to watch the Patriots. I don't think they're done, like I said, and I'm really excited now for the fall for us to get back to football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a huge sentiment between everybody. This is pretty much where you get the free agency and, like everybody feels like they're winners, then signing whoever it is that they wanted or whoever they believe can help the team, and then you get the draft coming up, and then after that it's like, all right, well, where's September? Well,
Yeah, well, at least this summer, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we get OTAs, we get training camp, so we can hear some of the sights and sounds around the league to get us excited for the season coming up. And we get a 17-game season, so it'll be even longer this year.
yeah, it's interesting. There's a very interesting wrinkle on how everything's going to go there. So that means we drop down to 2 preseason games, right? If they actually do have preseason games. Was that the agreement? I'm pretty sure the preseason is compromised a little bit from the extra
Yeah,
week.
I don't know exactly what they came down to. In my opinion, they don't need preseason. What a waste of time the preseason is, other than to sell some tickets, which, I mean, I guess they need to do now with the limited attendance that they had last season. But preseason games, the guys don't play. They don't show up. Some guys don't even dress. It's really not a big deal. The players hate it. It's a chance for them to get
I don't
hurt.
think it's not a big deal for the starters, but I think it is. It's a big deal for the guys who are trying
Big
to make
deal
the
for
team.
the lower 15.
Yeah. So
The last maybe 15, I would say even 10. Last 10 guys to make the roster. That's who it's a big deal for. But I think the majority of the decisions really get made in training camp, especially the last couple of years we've had live training camps and combined training camps with other teams where you're scrimmaging just on a practice field. You're just not in a stadium with fans. So I think that they really don't need the preseason spectacle. It could be done during training camp and just be done with it. Get into the 17-game season, because I think if you have a 4-game preseason again and a 17-game season with still only one bye, that's not enough. You need to add another bye for the players. You're going to end up getting players hurt. And if you're preaching player safety, one of the biggest things in preseason is guys get hurt. So if you're preaching player safety, then the preseason is not necessary.
The one thing I hope they keep the exact same playoff format that they had this past season. I think it's the best one that they've rolled out in a long time. It adds on 2 extra teams, which adds on more possibilities, more playoff revenue, more fans at the end. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, the playoff format was awesome. We'll see kind of how it goes. I think that I really do hope they keep it also. That was a fun little tournament that they had. Only one bye for one of the teams on each conference, so that was cool. Kind of makes it a little more hopeful to get that number 1 overall seed, and a little more something to work for as opposed to just settling for the 2 seed. So I definitely think the NFL got it right there. I'd hope to see they keep it.
All right. Any more teams stick out at you other than the Patriots?
Yeah,
big movers.
We'll see kind of what's going on around the league. The Dolphins signed Will Fuller today. They needed another wide receiver to complement Devontae Parker. They get another one from Houston. Former player Kenny Stills was actually traded to Houston or to Miami from Houston, and now they get another one from Houston as well. Will Fuller played 11 games last year at 880 yards and 8 touchdowns, so he's a great wide receiver to complement whatever they decide to do at quarterback, whether it's keep Tua, draft somebody, or try to get Deshaun Watson. We'll see kind of what goes on there. Not a lot of other moves in the AFC East other than the Bills signed former Bears starting quarterback Mitchell Trubisky to a 1-year contract. So he'll be the backup in Buffalo to Josh Allen. The Bears signed Andy Dalton to be their starting quarterback, so that's an interesting kind of play there, as they were supposed to be the number 1 team on the market for Russell Wilson. The 2 GMs, the Bears and the Seahawks, met in Fargo, North Dakota, of all places. People are presuming it was Trey Lance's pro day that they were at, which is a whole nother bag of bones to get into. But they were saying that they had a trade set up for, I think, 3 first-round picks from the Bears, as well as 2 players and a 3rd-round pick. So just a lot going back to Seattle for Russ. Seattle ultimately picks up the phone and says, nope, we're not trading for him, or we're not trading him. So the Bears had to scramble, pick up Andy Dalton. We'll see kind of how that works. He filled in for Dak last year when Dak got hurt. There's been big names around the league. AJ Green goes to goes to Arizona to be on the Cardinals. So now if he gets healthy and gets back to his old form, you have a nice 1-2 punch out there with DeAndre Hopkins and AJ Green, two of the biggest name wide receivers in the league the last couple of years. So interesting there. Minnesota gets Patrick Peterson, future Hall of Fame cornerback for sure, goes to Minnesota. The Jets really haven't made too much noise. They've signed a couple guys here and there. People are kind of waiting to see. There might be in the market for Deshaun. They might be holding on to that cap room for that reason. People also think that Juju Smith-Schuster, the wide receiver from Pittsburgh, could be coming on the way. And then you got the Giants signing Kyle Rudolph today. They've made a slew of changes to the offense. They signed Mike Glennon to back up Daniel Jones this season. So that means Colt McCoy is probably on his way out. So it's a lot of fun around the league. We'll have a more detailed breakdown, hopefully when we do a draft preview here in the next couple of weeks to see what team needs are and whatnot. But really, the biggest splashes so far have been in New England.
Absolutely. So I will say the New York Jets, they have their pass rusher that they were looking for pretty much decades. Well, at least one decade. Since pretty much Calvin Pace. They signed Carl Lawson from the Cincinnati Bengals. And, on paper, he doesn't have a lot of sacks, but he does have a lot of QB pressures. So, hopefully they see something in him, and that ends up working out. I think a lot of the thoughts around the league now, there is the notion that the salary cap stayed the same. So there wasn't, the teams didn't want to overspend and kind of things like that. But there's also the notion where the first days of free agency is always kind of like fool's gold, where, just players are looking to cash in on huge deals, and like some of them don't live up to the huge deal status like they have. There's that, and there's the possibility that it might not, the spending big on day one of free agency might not always lead to success in the playoffs and in the season, in the playoffs, and then ultimately in the championship. I mean, crossing sports, the New York Yankees, they spent billions of dollars and only got one championship in 2009, and that was it in the 2020s.
You almost said in the last decade. It's been more than a decade, pal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm talking about the specific pass rusher.
No. I'm saying you almost said the Yankees only got one championship in the last decade. It's been more than a decade.
Yeah. So, they spent a lot, and it seems like on day one of free agency, they're like the winners, and they got like the big ticket guys. But then like they've even learned over the years that it's not good to spend big on day one and overspend on talent when you can pretty much find the same thing in the barn.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things to come out of once the dust settles after the first 2 days or 3 days of free agency, with the way that this legal tampering period is, you find out how these deals are actually structured, because the teams are the ones that are releasing the information instead of the agents. So most of the time you hear Matt Judon signs for $65 million over 3 years. You go, whoa, that's a lot of money for a guy to only be there for 3 years. Or is he worth that much money? Things like that. When then you get the contracts coming out, and now the most one of those guys that they signed makes is $6 million towards next season's cap. Presumably the following season, the 2022 season rather, the cap's most likely going up with the new TV deal that was signed today. The details are supposed to be released shortly.
Right. So it'll be fun, but I wouldn't say that there's I'm not big on the winners and losers of day ones of free agency, because if you think about it, like, all right, so the Patriots signed like what, 6 guys? Like, what's the chances of all 6 guys living up to that their contracts, their shiny brand new contracts? It's not realistic. Like, a couple of those guys will be good, a couple of guys will fall off, a couple of guys will probably be injury plagued. It's just the way it goes in sports.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think that way, but I mean, how many times have we said, "Oh, Tom Brady can't win another one," right? The Patriots can't do it again, can they?
It's sickening how, like, basically Tom Brady winning in the winning in Tampa Bay just feels like a Patriots win. Like, it's just ugh.
Well,
It's just
not
that
even talking
stigma.
about that. Even the Rams Super Bowl, it was, oh, he can't do it again, can they? They can't figure out a way to do this again, can they? Especially when that was Patrick Mahomes' Super Bowl to win right there, and they took it away from him and walked right in and beat LA, one of the highest powered offenses in the league, and only held them to 3 points. So, like I said, they find ways to get it done. Obviously, they're with those new signees are with the organization because of the reputation that Bill Belichick has. And if Bill Belichick lives up to his expectation, you got to think that percentage of guys who hit on their new contracts is probably going to be pretty high.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, the Patriots are great. There you go. No, no news here. I don't think we need to really stress it anymore. So let's move on to the NHL. So now there's been some fluctuations at the top here. There was one point where the Toronto Maple Leafs were absolutely running away with the top spot. Let's say the President's Trophy in the NHL, and now other teams have actually topped them. Right now in the Central Division, it's all Florida because the Florida Panthers and Lightning are both tied at 42 points. And then in the East, the Capitals and the New York Islanders are both at 42 points, leading the East. In the North Division, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs are at 40 points. And in the West, we have the Vegas Golden Knights at 41 points. What are your thoughts on anything NHL right now?
I do want to go ahead and say I did call this Panthers team being this good. I said in our preview show weeks ago that this team was young, they were hungry, they were really good. Alexander Barkov has shown he's a top 5 player in this league, just blowing teams away left and right, and the ability to come back when they're down. They've won games down 2, 3, 4 goals, and have found ways to win hockey games. So the Panthers have been tremendous. The Lightning have been pretty good. I mean, the Lightning are the Lightning. We expected them to be where they are. And you kind of moving across. We move to the East Division, the almighty, all powerful East Division. It's just as competitive as we said it was going to be. We've had so many lead changes at the top of that division. The Islanders had a streak where they were losing a few games, then went on a 10-game run where they won 10 games in a row. And then we had the teams at the bottom that we thought would be at the bottom, with the Devils and the Sabres both losing 11 and 12 in a row, respectively. The Sabres are still currently experiencing that losing streak, have since fired their head coach. The Rangers are kind of stuck in no man's land, where I think the division, like we've been mentioning on the show, because they're so young and still inhibited by the cap issues from teammates past, they're kind of stuck where the top of the division is a little too strong, and then they get to the bottom of the division and blow teams away. I.e., last night scoring 9 goals on the Flyers. Nobody saw that coming, but it was interesting to see how excited Rangers fans were once that happened.
Oh yeah, I was spewing in my pants all night. It was great, absolutely
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, look, it happens. Teams get blown out, and teams find ways to lose hockey games. Not quite in that fashion. Uh,
There's one topic I'd like to address at at this point when it comes to the New York Rangers. There was a situation last night where the coaching staff was the three main coaches on the bench were benched by the NHL because of the COVID-19 protocols. So there were the three Hartford guys came up and they took over the bench, and the Rangers magically scored 9 goals and won 9-0. Now there's a bunch of Ranger fans who think that the current coach David Quinn should, be fired immediately and just have these three guys, and there's this notion that the Rangers are going to play so much better. I don't understand it. I understand that there are some judgment calls that happen in the games and some adjustments that happen, but let's face it though, these practices are all done with the current coaching staff. And the preparation, there's hours and days of preparation that goes into game days. So it's not like like the games are only for those 2.5, 3 hours, and that's where all the decisions are made, and that's where all the preparations are made. So the footprint of the current coaching staff was all over this game, even though there was three other guys that were on the bench. I just don't understand the notion where everybody feels like they have to have like they have to make all these quick coaching changes, and all of a sudden the Rangers are going to go win the Stanley Cup, winning 9-0 every game. I don't understand. Did you hear any of that on your end?
Yeah, I did, and I never understood. Look, I've always been under the impression, or I always live by the rule: don't fire someone till you know who's behind them. Because if you fire a guy now, why would you go through a complete rebuild again with a new head coach when you got your guy with David Quinn, and then he's started to bring in the right pieces? Obviously, the right pieces are there because he's had say in that. It's not all Josh Gordon. He's not the only one doing it, or Jeff Gordon. It's not just his doing. David Quinn has his fingerprints all over this team, all over the way that they operate from the back end all the way up.
Yeah, they were using the same lines as the game before, so it wasn't even like they kind of reinvented the wheel having these other three guys in there. It's not like, oh, substitute teacher time, so we're gonna do everything the different way. It doesn't make any sense, in my opinion, anyway. It was kind of weird seeing that floating around the social media yesterday.
Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. You basically gave them a glorified beer league game where there is no coach. If anything, you kind of gave those guys all right, no one expects us to do anything. Let's just go and do it. And they went out there and did it in a big way. And you basically just let those guys be those guys. I think that game had a lot of benefits for that team moving forward. Remains to be seen, but I think that it's a step in the right direction. I think it gets some of those guys that weren't scoring goals going, i.e. Mika Zibanejad, in a big, big way. He had 3 goals all season, scores 3 goals in one period last night. Second time in NHL history, a player to have 6 goals or 6 points in one period, 3 goals, 3 assists for him. And the other person actually is from the New York Islanders. Brian Trottier was the last one to do it. And Mika ties that record. So just an interesting little tidbit there. He gets going. Obviously, Georgiev needed that one to keep himself moving forward. I think he's had a rough last couple of weeks. And with Shesterkin hurt, it hasn't been easy for him to kind of carry the weight. So that's an interesting piece of information to keep an eye on. But I think other than that, I think you move forward. David Quinn comes back and the rest of the coaching staff come back. I think you give him another year at least. You got to let him run through it when you don't, because the crutch for this team is the cap issues and being able to add a big, big contract.
Absolutely. So, to touch on your point with the Florida Panthers, I'd have to agree. One underrated notion is Joe Quenneville, Stanley Cup winning coach, head coach of that team, has really taken them to the next level. And I think that I think it took a while to get his footprint totally on that team, but now it's really taken off, and like their elite players are playing at an elite level. It's just it's really cool to see, and hopefully unfortunately this happens at in the COVID times, but hopefully that'll help the team in Florida, because they're notoriously known for not having a lot of fans, for not having a great attendance records. Hopefully that helps their franchise overall.
Yeah, 100%. I think Joe Quenneville's finally got his grasp, like you said, on this team. It's taken him a couple seasons to kind of get going, but I think it also took that team a couple seasons to find the right pieces. You had the core guys there with Barkov and Huberdeau, but now you have big production from guys like Frank Vetrano, guys like Owen Tippett, and then you have a good farm system for those guys coming up, where and Patrick Hornquist is there too. But then you got Spencer Knight, who is a Hobie Baker finalist in the NCAA. You have a lot of good draft picks the Panthers have had over the last couple of seasons. Barry Zito and Joel Quenneville are my 2 picks so far for GM and Coach of the Year, respectively, at this point in time, especially if the Panthers are able to make the playoffs and get a series win, something they haven't been able to do since '96.
I'd have to agree. And then we'll touch on the East real quike. So move over Senators. the Buffalo Sabres are the worst team in the NHL at 16 points.
Shock.
It's amazing. And also, too, the Anaheim Ducks, the bottom has fallen out of that franchise as well. They're at the bottom of the West Division at 22 points.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo's just been atrocious the last couple of weeks. I mean, losing games by 5 goals or more in 3 of 5, I think they were at, giving up 6 goals in all 5 games. It's just been crazy to see the decline of that franchise from just a short time ago, making it to the Stanley Cup final or Eastern Conference final before losing to Ottawa. I mean, look at those. Both of those franchises were just in the Stanley Cup finals maybe 8 years ago. A little bit, maybe a little bit more. So, I mean, and we know the history of in Ottawa. Poor management, poor ownership has really hindered that franchise. The Sabres really haven't had that much of an excuse. Since drafting Jack Eichel, they've made bad move after bad move after bad move. Jack was supposed to come in and help save that organization. That hasn't really panned out. I think Jack is quickly going to realize that he's in the wrong spot and he's going to need out. I'd look for him to request a trade. Taylor Hall's probably on the move. He hasn't panned out there. Jeff Skinner got paid in the offseason a bunch of money, and he hasn't been doing well. And then Jack gets hurt, so they're losing a lot of big names in their lineup, and they're just not good. Anaheim, we expected to be it was them and the Kings were supposed to be the two bottom teams in that division. Out west, with the Sharks, even almost all of California really hadn't had good off seasons additions, and really able to add players to be able to be competitive, especially in that tough Western division.
Yeah, the West Division is going pretty much how we planned it, except that the Minnesota Wild is holding the number 2 spot at 37 points, and they've had the Russian rookie sensation. I want to say Kirill
Kaprizov.
Kaprizov. There you go. So they have him and Kokkonen, the starting the goaltending. Well, they have the goaltending tandem, but it's really it's Cam Talbot and was it Cahokin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the goaltender there. So they've had these rookie additions come in, and they're so good that Matt Zuccarello right now is a point per game player, and in this since he's been back from injury, I mean they're clicking on all cylinders right now, and they're ruffling the feathers of what the West was supposed to be. The West was supposed to be the Golden Knights and the Avalanche and the Blues, all duking it out at the top 3 spots. But right now, the Wild, it looks like they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, the Wild have been playing good hockey. It's been fun to watch them play. I mean, this kid Kaprizov, I mean, I shouldn't say he's a kid. He's the same age as me.
I'll call him a kid because
being a rookie in the NHL, though, he's been doing some things that not a lot of people can do 10 years into their career. So he's one of the top players in the league so far this season. He's the clear front runner for the Calder Trophy. It's been fun to watch, and it's fun to watch that division be competitive. Minnesota deserves a winner up there, the quote-unquote state of hockey. So they definitely are looking for a winner, and he's definitely that piece to build that team around.
Yeah, and then we'll finish up in the North, where the Winnipeg Jets are doing pretty well. They're tied for second with the Edmonton Oilers at 38 points in that North Division, and the Maple Leafs are still hanging on to the top spot for a little while. The Canucks, the Vancouver Canucks, are still the biggest disappointment. Them and the Senators have the most games played in the entire NHL, and the Canucks are at 32 points. So they're 8 games away from the top slot. They're 2 games away from the playoffs, but it's kind of tough when you're punting away the games that you have in hand. And I pictured them being a lot better top to bottom throughout the season, but they've right now it seems like they're going on a little bit of a streak, and Thacker Demko has taken over the number 1 starter spot from Brandon Hope, and they've solidified the goaltending there a little bit, and they've been winning more games, but they're not having the same kind of offensive output overall, top to bottom of the lineup that gave them the success in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I think you picked them to win that division, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
I did. That's what I'm saying. I'm like,
Um,
oh man,
I don't think I picked them to make the playoffs.
nope.
And I just didn't trust Braden Holtby coming off of a bad year, new team, bigger contract. I didn't trust him. Thatcher Demko's been obviously taking over the starting job. He's a stud, but they haven't. I mean, people have figured out Jack Hughes or Quinn Hughes. They've been able to kind of slow Pedersen down, or at least neither one of them have had the output that they had last season. So their young guys have been struggling. They don't have a lot of veteran leadership. So they're a younger team, so that's a struggle. So I think just overall, I think you're right. They're starting to kind of figure it out here, but I think it's going to take them a year or so to get going. Toronto's been, I think I picked Toronto to win this division or Edmonton, but Toronto has been absolutely incredible in this division. Winnipeg, they're 10-0-1 coming off of a loss, so they don't streak losses together, which is important, and especially in a shortened season. So they pick up wins where they need to. Edmonton, I think, is being Edmonton. I think they're kind of right there on the bubble. What are they going to do? And they're being carried by Connor McDavid. Who else, right? I mean, this is the best player in the world, and I don't think he's making it a question. The way that he's playing, he leads the league in goals, leads the league in points. The clear favorite for the Hart Trophy, the clear favorite for the Rocket Richard, clear favorite for the Art Ross. I mean, go down the list. Ted Lindsay Award. He's going to take them all home again. The one thing he needs is that Stanley Cup. I don't know that this Edmonton team's going to do that. I think they'll be busy come trade deadline period, if I would have to guess. We'll see kind of how teams approach this deadline or the trade deadline period coming up here with the way that the COVID protocols are set up in the NHL. So we'll see what kind of moves teams decide to make, but I'd expect Edmonton to try to do something. Calgary, again, one of those middle of the road teams. What are they? They're really trying to find their identity. They get very streaky as well, where they go on runs for a good game, and then they lose 6-0 to Edmonton last night. So I think, and then Ottawa, I picked Ottawa. That's my one black eye. I picked Ottawa to go to the playoffs. I like the way that young team set up, and you see the flashes of greatness. You see Matt Murray. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion. He can figure out how to get going. Then that team's going to be good. So we'll see. And Montreal has been, I think, better than people expect, but they're not quite there yet.
Absolutely. So the trade deadline is April 12th, and the one interesting wrinkle from what you're saying is it's gonna take a team, a North Division Canadian Division team, 2 weeks to receive the player that they've acquired. So that's a tough bargaining chip to have to go through. So that's going to be really tough. The other teams, they don't have the teams within the United States. They don't have that same issue. So like a team, acquiring a player will have that player within 2 days or whatever the normal time is. So that's going to be the one interesting wrinkle. I think that's really going to mess a lot of teams up.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll kind of keep tracking that as we go. We're 3 weeks away from that trade deadline. So we'll see kind of where it goes. We're going to have the NHL trade deadline and then the NFL draft. So we're going to be rolling here in the next couple of weeks.
All right. So we have a couple minutes left of this show. What I want to touch on real quick is the NBA. The trade deadline is going to be March 25th. At 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're gonna have some more NBA information next week. But right now, the Utah Jazz are number 1 in the West, and the Phoenix Suns are number 2 in the West. So I don't know. The NBA season is really getting interesting to the point that the normal teams that you see up there, like Lakers and Clippers, which are 3 and 4, and Golden State Warriors are not even in the playoffs right now. They're in the ninth seed looking in. It's just interesting to see up and down what's going on in the West.
It's definitely a change from the last few years where it's really just been the top 2 or 3 teams in each conference running away with everything.
The Utah Jazz. I mean, the Utah Jazz and the Phoenix Suns, they're not, they don't have this big 3, like top dollar superstars, max contracts. They don't, they're just really well built teams, and they drafted well, and they're reaping the benefits of that. Well, actually, you know, and then they're in the West. If they were in the East, forget it. They'd be like they'd probably be challenging the Bulls record.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the East is set up is so top heavy, it's incredible. But the West is obviously the most competitive conference. It has been forever. So we just continue to kind of go through it and see. And I mean, it's nice to see these two teams in the top seeds right now. I don't think that's going to remain the way that goes for the rest of the season. I still think the Lakers and the Nets are going to find their way into the finals. And then who knows? I'd have to start watching a little bit deeper detail to see who I think would win that series. But right now, they're pointing to Brooklyn.
I'd have to say, you know, like I prepare the NBA for the show topic. We usually run over. We're not able to get to the NBA a lot of the times, and the Utah Jazz have been at the top for pretty much the past month, like the best team in the NBA. Which
I was
is
gonna say, it seems like every time we mention the NBA, the Utah Jazz are still in number one seed. Donovan Mitchell sounds like he's doing a lot of good out there.
Yeah,
I haven't been able to catch a lot of Utah Jazz games in my spare time, but it sounds like they're playing good basketball.
Yeah, they're relying on the 3-pointers. They have a near record amount of 3-pointers for the amount of games that they've played, and they're doing really well. It's great to see. Absolutely, I love the parity, and I love the fact that we have these superstar kind of teams doing well. And then we look at the East, and right now the 76ers are holding down they're actually tied with the with the Brooklyn Nets at 28 and 13. So